The words came out of Vanessa's mouth like poison. As she stood in my seaside kitchen adjusting her engagement ring, she said, "The best gift you could give us would be if you just vanished from our lives forever." She didn't even look up from her phone while saying it. My son Daniel just nodded, scrolling through his tablet. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Auntie May 365 Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Valerie from Belgium. Thank you for being part of our family. But let me tell you how I got to this shocking moment. 2 years ago, I had moved heaven and earth to help them. I had sold my beloved seaside cottage, the place where my dear husband Tom and I spent our happiest summers, to give Daniel and Vanessa $65,000 for their first home. Every penny from my retirement fund went to making their dreams come true. They promised I'd always be welcome, that I'd be part of their growing family. But here we were the night before their wedding that I was paying for, and Vanessa decided I was worthless. You heard what she said. Daniel finally spoke, not looking up from his screen. "Tomorrow is our big day. Your drama is making everything worse." My drama, I had spent all day helping them pack wedding favors, picking up flowers from 3 different shops, and listening to Vanessa complain about the band, the cake, and the photographer. All I had done wrong was suggest they didn't need a chocolate fountain and an ice cream bar. "Where am I supposed to sleep tonight?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Vanessa shrugged while painting her nails bright pink. "I don't know, maybe your friend Carol's house, or get a motel room." "Honestly, Evelyn, I don't care where you go as long as you're not here tomorrow morning. This is my son's home too," I said quietly. "Actually..." Daniel put down his tablet and looked at me for the first time. "Vanessa handles all our money stuff now. She's the one who makes the house payments. You just helped us get started once." "Once?" "Just once. $65,000 turned into just helped us get started once." I stood there in the living room where I had painted walls, hung pictures, and cooked Sunday dinners for 2 years, looking at the beautiful furniture my money had helped buy, the big TV I had gotten them for Christmas. These 2 people had taken everything I gave them and now acted like they earned it all by themselves. Something deep inside me changed. Not broke, but shifted like a switch, flipping to a different setting. "You're absolutely right," I said calmly. "I should leave." Vanessa looked surprised. She probably expected me to cry, to beg to make a scene she could tell her friends about later. "I'll get my things and be gone in 30 minutes. Daniel actually smiled. "That's smart, Mom. We can talk after our honeymoon when things calm down. Talk after the honeymoon. Like this was just some small fight about what movie to watch." I went upstairs to the spare room where I'd been staying for 8 months. Not my room. I was never allowed to call it that. Always the spare room, because spare things get thrown away eventually. As I put my clothes in my old suitcase, I could hear them downstairs already planning what to do with the space. Vanessa wanted to make it her craft room. Daniel thought it would be perfect for his gaming setup. Neither of them seemed to feel bad about throwing out the woman who made their perfect life possible. I stopped at Tom's picture on the dresser. 41 years of marriage, and he never once made me feel unwanted in my own home. "Don't worry, honey," I whispered to his smiling face. "This isn't over yet." But first, I needed to make some important phone calls. Sitting in my car outside their house? No, wait. Outside the house, my money helped pay for. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer's emergency line. Kathleen Monroe had been helping me since Tom died, and she had warned me this might happen someday. "Evelyn, it's almost midnight. Is everything okay, Kathleen? I need you to look at the paperwork from when I helped Daniel and Vanessa buy their house. All the documents." Long pause. "Did something happen with the kids?" I told her everything. Vanessa's cruel words, Daniel's cold agreement, how they treated my $65,000 like pocket change. Kathleen listened carefully, and I could hear her typing on her computer. "Evelyn, I've been worried about this situation for months. The way they've been treating your help like a gift instead of what it really was. What do you mean, what it really was?" Another pause, longer this time. Don't you remember those extra papers I made you sign? The ones I insisted on when you told me about Vanessa's shopping problems? My heart started beating fast. Kathleen, please tell me you protected me somehow. Oh, sweetie, that $65,000 wasn't just a gift. Legally, it was a loan with your name on the house papers as part owner. Vanessa never signed the final agreement forms I sent. According to the law, you own 30% of that house. I almost dropped my phone. Are you serious? Dead serious. Vanessa kept saying she'd sign the papers later, and you were so worried about keeping peace that you never pushed it. But the bank has you listed as a co-owner. The house deed shows your share. It's all completely legal. Through the kitchen window, I could see Vanessa trying on different jewelry with her wedding dress, probably posting pictures online. She was laughing and dancing, completely unaware that her world was about to fall apart. Kathleen, what would happen if I wanted to sell my part of the house? Well, as a part owner, you could force them to sell the whole house. They'd have the first chance to buy your share, of course. They could pay you what it's worth now, and if they can't afford to buy me out, then the house gets sold to someone else and everyone splits the money based on how much they own. I watched Daniel come into the kitchen opening a beer and celebrating getting rid of his annoying mother, probably. Kathleen, I need you to write up legal papers saying I want to sell. I want them delivered first thing Monday morning. Evelyn, are you sure about this? Once we start this process, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They want me to disappear, fine, but I'm taking my 30% with me. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness watching my son and his bride-to-be celebrate their freedom in the house I helped make possible. They had no idea that in just a few days their perfect world was going to crash down. But first, I had one more important call to make. Ocean View Wedding Hall, this is Kelly speaking. Hi, Kelly, this is Evelyn Grant. I need to talk to someone about tomorrow's wedding reception. Oh, Mrs. Grant, how exciting. The big day is tomorrow. How can I help? I'm afraid there's been a change. I need to cancel the reception. Cancel. But ma'am, the wedding is tomorrow. The flowers are arranged. The food is ready. The staff is scheduled. I understand. And I'll pay whatever fees I need to. The thing is, I'm the one who signed the contract and paid the deposit. I believe I can make changes. Pause rustling of papers. Let me check our records. Yes, the contract has your name and your credit card, but surely you want to talk to the bride and groom first. No need. I'm making a business decision. Please cancel everything. Mrs. Grant, this seems like something the happy couple should know about. I watched Vanessa through the window now showing her dress to someone on video chat, probably her sister. The happy couple made it very clear that they don't want me involved in their lives anymore. So I'm just doing what they asked. 20 minutes later, I was checked into the Seabreeze Inn downtown, ordering pizza, and feeling something I hadn't felt in years, the power of taking control of my own life. My phone started ringing at 12:23 a.m. What did you do? Vanessa's voice was so loud and angry, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I did exactly what you asked, I said calmly, turning down the TV in my hotel room. You wanted me to disappear, so I disappeared. The phone shook in my hand as Vanessa's voice still echoed in my ears. The best gift you could give us would be if you just vanished from our lives forever. That sentence had already poisoned the air in my son's seaside home, and now even sitting in my small room at the Seabreeze Inn, I could still feel its sting. I had vanished just as she demanded. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I told you before how I sold my beloved seaside cottage, where my husband Tom and I spent the happiest summers of our lives just to give Daniel and Vanessa the money for their first home. $65,000, every penny of my retirement fund, poured into their dreams. And what did I get in return? A cold dismissal and a demand to disappear. That night, after calling my lawyer, Kathleen Monroe, and learning that I legally owned 30% of their house, something inside me shifted. I also called Ocean View Wedding Hall and canceled the reception that I had foolishly agreed to finance. It was supposed to be a fairy tale night with flowers, music, food, and laughter. Instead, it became the opening note of a storm. And then, just as I thought the night could not grow darker, something happened. A knock on my hotel door. It was past midnight and my heart raced. Through the peephole, I saw the weathered face of Mr. Harris, my neighbor, for 15 years before I sold the seaside cottage. I opened the door a crack. Mr. Harris, what on earth are you doing here? His eyes were troubled. Evelyn. I heard shouting tonight. I came by the house to drop off some fishing gear for Daniel, and I overheard everything. That girl, Vanessa, she has no idea who she's talking to. I thought you should know I'm willing to testify. If they try to throw you out, you won't be alone. At that moment, my chest tightened. It was both comforting and horrifying. Comforting because someone else had heard the cruelty I endured. Horrifying because the family shame was now public, shared with an outsider. The walls of privacy had collapsed. My nightmare wasn't hidden anymore. It was spilling into the neighborhood. By 12:23 a.m., as I told you before, my phone rang with Vanessa screaming, "What did you do?" She was nearly hysterical when she learned I had canceled the $18,000 reception. Her voice was shrill, panicked, desperate, like someone watching their castle crumble, stone by stone. Daniel's voice followed sharp with disbelief. "Mom, this is crazy. You can't just cancel our wedding because you're mad about where you sleep." But they didn't understand. This wasn't about a bed. This was about years of disrespect, years of treating me as a bank account instead of a mother. When I told them calm and steady, I didn't cancel your wedding. I canceled the party I was paying, for the silence on the line was deafening. Vanessa's sobbing soon filled the void, loud, messy, almost feral. Her sobs weren't about losing me, they were about losing what I could provide. And then the terror in their voices turned into something worse, chaos. Daniel began shouting at Vanessa in the background, angry, frightened, blaming her for provoking me. She screamed back, hysterical. I sat there in my quiet hotel room, the glow of the television washing over me, listening to the sounds of my son's home collapsing into noise and fury. I could almost see it. Vanessa ripping at her hair, Daniel slamming his fist on the counter, both of them realizing the fantasy they built with my money was starting to disintegrate. Their panic was my proof that I had been the foundation all along. Without me, their perfect little world was sinking like a sandcastle into the tide. Mr. Harris, who had lingered by the hallway, knocked again. "I hate to intrude, Evelyn, but I heard your phone call. Thin walls. You've got them scared, real scared." I covered my face with my hands. My humiliation had reached a new depth. Not only had my son and his fiancée discarded me, but now the neighbor knew every detail of our disaster. "Maybe it's good, Mr. Harris said gently. "People should see what you've endured. They'll understand you weren't treated fairly." But all I felt was horror. Horror that my shame was no longer private. Horror that my life had become a kind of neighborhood spectacle. I imagined whispers over fences, voices in the grocery store saying, "Did you hear what Daniel and Vanessa did to Evelyn?" For a woman of my generation, reputation was everything. To have mine dragged through the mud by the very people I had sacrificed for it felt like the floor had been pulled from under me. That night, sleep did not come. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, trembling as if the whole room were shaking. I could still hear Vanessa's words like a curse, "Vanish from our lives forever." And for a terrifying moment, I thought, what if I really did? What if I disappeared entirely, not just from their home, but from the world? The loneliness clawed at me like icy fingers. But then, through that suffocating despair, something stronger began to burn fury. Not wild, reckless fury, but a focused fire. If my son and his bride-to-be wanted me gone, they would learn exactly what gone meant. Gone was the house. Gone was the money. Gone was the safety net I had so carefully stitched under their reckless lives. The horror of being unwanted twisted into the chaos of their crumbling plans and the instant collapse of their dream wedding. And in the middle of that wreckage, I discovered a truth I had forgotten. I wasn't powerless. I was the earthquake under their foundation. By dawn, my phone had logged over 40 missed calls and nearly as many desperate text messages. Pleas, threats, promises, all written in digital ink, none of them sincere. I pulled the curtains open and watched the sun rise over the ocean. The waves crashed hard against the rocks, wild and merciless. It felt like the sea itself was echoing my emotions, terrifying, chaotic, destructive, but unstoppable. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a storm. And yet I must ask you, if you were in my place, would you have walked away forever, pressing 0, or would you have fought back to reclaim your dignity, pressing 1? When the morning light finally touched the curtains of my small room at the Sea Breeze Inn, I thought maybe the storm had passed. My phone still vibrated with unanswered calls, desperate texts from Daniel and Vanessa begging me to undo what I had done. I didn't reply. Not yet. I poured myself a cup of lukewarm hotel coffee and stared out at the waves crashing against the rocky shore. They seemed louder that morning, almost mocking, as if the ocean itself knew what I was about to discover. Because that day, everything I thought I understood about the situation was about to be turned upside down. Around 9 o'clock, there was a sharp knock on my door. I expected another pleading visit from Daniel, maybe even Vanessa. Instead, a courier in a gray uniform handed me a thick envelope. "Urgent delivery, Mrs. Grant," he said, tipping his cap. It was from the bank. My hands trembled as I tore it open. At first, the words blurred together, but then the sentence stood out black and cold on the page. Notice of refinancing approval. Daniel and Vanessa Collins Grant, primary borrowers. My heart slammed in my chest. Refinancing. On the house I partly owned. How was that possible? I sank down on the bed, the paper shaking in my hands. The letter explained it all weeks earlier. Daniel and Vanessa had secretly refinanced the mortgage, pulling out tens of thousands in cash, using the house as collateral. They had signed everything without telling me, and the bank was now expecting larger monthly payments. I felt like the floor gave way beneath me. After all the money I had given them after selling my seaside cottage to lift them up, they had not only betrayed me but placed all of us in financial peril. I called Kathleen Monroe immediately. "How could they do this?" I cried into the phone. "I'm listed as part owner. How could the bank approve this behind my back?" Her voice was tight. "Evelyn, they may have presented incomplete documents. Some banks rush through approvals without properly verifying co-ownership. It's sloppy, but it happens. We'll fight it, but the fact remains they now owe more than before. This isn't just reckless, it's catastrophic." The word echoed, catastrophic. I could hardly breathe. My son and his fiancée hadn't just hurt me emotionally. They had tied a noose of debt around all our necks. And because my name was still on the deed, that noose had my name on it too. It felt like the world had flipped upside down overnight. Just hours ago, I had felt like a storm, strong and powerful, finally in control. Now I felt crushed beneath a mountain I didn't build. Later that morning, Daniel finally appeared at my hotel. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a boy again, not the grown man he was supposed to be. "Mom, you don't understand," he pleaded, pushing his way into the room. "We had to refinance. Vanessa wanted upgrades for the house. The wedding bills kept piling up, and so you stole from me." I cut in my voice, shaking. "You signed documents that endangered my share without even telling me. Do you know what this means? Do you know what you've done?" Daniel buried his face in his hands. "We thought we could handle it. We thought with your help." With my help, I almost laughed, but the sound that came out was closer to a sob. "My help has already been everything, and you've treated it like nothing." The room spun. My chest ached. I couldn't catch my breath. It wasn't just betrayal. It was suffocation, like the walls were closing in and the air itself had turned against me. Vanessa stormed in. Moments later, mascara smeared down her cheeks, still in her robe. "This is your fault," she screamed. "If you hadn't canceled the reception, none of this would be happening. Now my parents are furious, our guests are humiliated, and you're making us look like beggars." I looked at her truly, looked at her. And for the first time, I saw not just an ungrateful young woman, but someone drowning in her own greed. She was flailing, gasping for air, dragging Daniel down with her. And worst of all, she was trying to drag me too. That was the moment despair fully settled in. The kind of despair that makes you question every sacrifice, every choice, every time you said yes when you should have said no. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But instead, I whispered, "Do you even hear yourself? Do you understand what you've done to your own lives?" To me, neither of them answered, because deep down they knew. As the day dragged on, my mind spun in circles. What if I couldn't untangle myself from this refinancing? What if their reckless decisions dragged me into bankruptcy? The thought of losing everything again was unbearable. And yet somewhere in the haze of shock and despair, I realized something else. This wasn't just my story. This was the kind of story people whispered about, the kind of tale that ended up in Reddit revenge stories, threads where readers gasped and shook their heads. The kind of story that proved betrayal can come from the very people you love most. I imagined strangers online reading about Evelyn Grant, the mother who gave up her cottage and her savings, only to be stabbed in the back. And though I hated the thought of my pain being entertainment, I also knew sometimes sharing a wound can warn others not to make the same mistake. That thought kept me upright. That and the knowledge that if this were one of those Reddit revenge stories, it wasn't over yet. The ending hadn't been written. And maybe, just maybe, I could still write it myself. By evening, Kathleen called again with a plan. "We'll challenge the refinancing in court," she said firmly. "It won't be easy, but you have rights. They can't erase your ownership." Her certainty steadied me, but the despair lingered. Because even if I won legally, I had already lost something deeper: trust. As I hung up the phone, the room grew quiet. Too quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat, uneven and heavy. I thought of Tom, my late husband, and wondered what he would say if he could see us now. Would he tell me to fight, or would he tell me to finally walk away? The ocean outside roared like thunder. And I realized this wasn't just about property or money anymore. This was about survival, emotional, financial, even spiritual survival. And so I leave you with this: if your own child betrayed you, like this refinancing the home you partly owned, would you forgive them or would you fight for your future? Tap that like button if you believe no parent should ever be forced into such despair. And tell me, would you press on for justice? Or would you walk away broken? Press 0. If you'd forgive, press 1. If you'd fight back. Because in stories like mine and in so many Reddit revenge stories, the real question isn't what was taken from you. The real question is, what will you do next after the crushing despair of discovering the refinancing? I spent the night in silence, staring at the ceiling of my little room at the Seabreeze Inn. The weight pressed down on me like an anchor. But by morning, something inside me hardened. Grief had burned away, leaving only steel. I would not allow myself to be used any longer. Kathleen Monroe called again, her tone brisk. "Evelyn, I've started the paperwork to challenge the refinancing. It will take time, but legally you still hold ground." Her words steadied me, but they weren't enough. I realized I didn't just need lawyers. I needed evidence, something undeniable that would show everyone who Daniel and Vanessa really were. That's when I remembered it. Months earlier, back when I was still trying to keep the peace, I had placed a small digital recorder in the spare room I used at their house. It was meant to capture late-night arguments, the cruel things Vanessa muttered when she thought I couldn't hear. I had tucked it into a drawer and forgotten all about it. Now, desperate for clarity, I pulled it out of my suitcase. My hands shook as I pressed play. Static, then voices. Daniel's voice? "She'll pay for everything. She always does. We just have to make her feel guilty enough." Vanessa's voice sharp and mocking. "Please." Evelyn's pathetic. "She acts tough, but she'll never walk away. We've got her wrapped around our little fingers. Once we refinance, she won't even realize she's trapped until it's too late." My stomach clenched. I paused the recording breathless. They had planned this. Not just careless spending, not just reckless mistakes, this was calculated, cold, manipulative. I sat very still, the hotel's air conditioner humming in the background, and felt something rise in me. A wave of resolve stronger than anything I had ever felt. For years, I had been their safety net, their servant, their invisible ATM. But no longer. This recording was my weapon, proof that I wasn't imagining their cruelty, proof that my worth was greater than the money they tried to squeeze from me. I copied the file onto a USB drive and slipped it into my purse. The act itself felt like reclaiming my dignity. That afternoon, Daniel called again, his voice pleading. "Mom, please, can't we just talk?" "Yes," I said evenly. "At Kathleen's office, tomorrow morning. Bring Vanessa." When they walked into the office, they looked exhausted, beaten down by the collapse of their perfect plans. Vanessa's eyes were swollen from crying, but her mouth was still tight with resentment. Kathleen motioned for us to sit. "Let's discuss terms," she said, spreading out documents. But I raised my hand. Not yet. I pulled the USB drive from my purse and placed it on the table. "Before we talk about money, I want you both to hear something." I pressed play. Their own voices filled the room. The sneering, the plotting, the certainty that I would never stand up for myself. Vanessa gasped. Daniel's face turned pale. Kathleen sat back, arms crossed, her expression grim. When the recording ended, silence hung in the air like a blade. I leaned forward. My voice was calm but sharp enough to cut glass. "You see, I'm not the weak woman you thought I was. You've treated me like a wallet, like a servant, like someone disposable. But I am your mother, Daniel, and I am a human being, Vanessa. I have worth, and I will not be erased." Vanessa tried to speak, but no words came. Daniel buried his head in his hands. Kathleen cleared her throat. "Evelyn, with this evidence, the court will have no doubt about intent. We can pursue full restitution. You're in the strongest position now." For the first time in months, I breathed deeply. My back straightened. My voice grew firmer. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to stop you from destroying me. If you want any chance at keeping that house, if you want any chance at repairing this family, you'll follow my terms." To the letter. And for once, they listened. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. In that moment, I felt something extraordinary. Not rage, not revenge, but the deep, steady power of self-worth. I wasn't the victim of their schemes anymore. I was the author of my own story. Later that evening, I walked along the shore, the waves lapping at my feet. A stranger walking by smiled and said, "Beautiful night, isn't it?" "Yes," I replied softly. "Beautiful, because I finally remembered who I am." The ocean roared behind me like applause. Stories like mine aren't just private wounds, they echo far and wide. They belong in the same space as the Reddit family tales people read late at night, shaking their heads at how cruel families can be and how courage can still rise from betrayal. My life had become one of those Reddit family tales, but this time I wasn't the victim. I was the survivor, and I want you to feel this. Too, your worth is not measured by what you give, but by who you are. Don't let anyone erase that truth. So tell me, as you listen to this voice carrying my story, do you find it engaging? If it doesn't move, you press 0. If it pulls you in deeply, press 1. When the meeting at Kathleen's office ended, I walked out into the bright coastal sun with my head held high. For the first time in years, I felt light, almost free. The recording had shattered their illusions and stripped away their excuses. My son and his wife sat in silence, cornered by their own words. Yet as I drove back to the Seabreeze Inn, a different weight pressed against my chest. Freedom, yes, but also bitterness. The truth I had uncovered brought no joy. It only reminded me of how deeply I had been betrayed by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. The lobby smelled faintly of salt and coffee. I paused by the bulletin board near the elevator. Among the flyers for fishing tours and seafood festivals, a colorful note caught my eye: Seaside Senior Hiking Group. Looking for new members. We meet every Saturday morning. Friendship, fresh air, and a little adventure. I stood there staring at the paper, feeling something stir inside me. For years, my life had revolved around Daniel and Vanessa. Their needs, their bills, their endless demands. The idea of walking through wooded trails with strangers, laughing and breathing in fresh air, felt almost unreal. Could I really step into a world that wasn't built on their constant taking? That night, as waves pounded against the rocks outside my window, I realized something. I had been freed, yes, but freedom is never without cost. I was alone now, alone in a way I hadn't been since Tom passed away. The bitterness of betrayal clung to me like damp air. Still beneath that bitterness was a strange, quiet pride. I had stood my ground. I had declared my worth. No one could take that from me. The next morning, Daniel knocked on my hotel door again. I hesitated before opening it. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. "Mom Vanessa wants to apologize." "Apologize?" I asked, arms crossed. "Yes." She knows the recording changed everything. She wants to explain." I shook my head slowly. "Daniel, explanations don't erase words spoken in cruelty. I don't need her apology. I need my dignity." He swallowed hard, looking younger than his 35 years. "So that's it. You're just walking away." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not walking away. I'm stepping into my own life. If you want to be part of it, the choice is yours. But I will not beg. Not anymore." He didn't answer. He simply lowered his head and walked away. As the door clicked shut, I felt both pain and relief. Pain because he was still my son. Relief because I finally understood sometimes love means letting go even when it leaves you standing in the cold. Later that week, I attended the hiking group. 10 strangers greeted me with warm smiles and firm handshakes. We climbed a gentle trail lined with pines, and for the first time in so long, I laughed freely. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but my heart felt light. Each step away from the past was a step into something new. Still as I walked, the bitterness lingered. I thought of Vanessa's sneer, Daniel's silence, the way they had plotted in whispers, believing I was too weak to resist. The betrayal cut deep, yet that cut was also a scar of survival proof that I had endured and chosen myself at last. That evening, sitting with tea by my hotel window, I realized something that stung like salt in a wound. Victory is not always sweet. Sometimes it tastes of ashes. Sometimes liberation is laced with loneliness. I miss Tom. I miss the life we built, the family dinners where laughter filled the air, not accusations. I longed for the warmth of belonging. But belonging at the price of my dignity was no longer acceptable. I whispered to his picture, still tucked in my purse. "I stood tall today, Tom. I stood tall for both of us." The next day, Kathleen called with updates. "The court will accept the recording as evidence," she said. "Legally, they have no choice but to meet your conditions or lose the house entirely. You've won, Evelyn." Won. The word echoed in my mind, and yet sitting alone, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. After the call, I opened the balcony door and let the sea breeze wash over me. It was cool, bracing, and it carried the scent of salt and freedom. In that moment, I understood what my new life would be, not filled with the noise of ungrateful voices, but with quiet dignity. It would be bitter at times, lonely at others, but it would be mine, entirely mine. And that, I realized, was enough. As night fell, I thought again of the hiking group of laughter among strangers who had no interest in my money, only my company. It gave me hope, fragile but real. Hope that even in solitude there could be joy. Hope that even after betrayal there could be pride. So I end this part of my story with a truth I wish someone had told me sooner. Liberation often comes with sorrow, but sorrow is better than chains. Bitter freedom is still freedom. And standing alone with pride is far better than kneeling in false love. I chose myself. And though it left me standing in silence, that silence was filled with dignity. The morning after my first hike with the Seaside Senior Group, I woke with sore legs, but a heart that felt strangely light. For the first time in years, I had laughed without guilt, without worrying who was keeping score of my generosity. The ocean outside my window shimmered like liquid silver. I poured myself a cup of tea and whispered, "Maybe I'm finally learning how to breathe again." The freedom I had claimed in Kathleen's office still carried a sting of bitterness, but something new had begun to blossom, a quiet rebirth. I was no longer chained to Daniel and Vanessa's demands. My days were mine to shape, and though solitude lingered, it no longer felt like punishment. It felt like possibility. That afternoon, as I browsed the local paper in the hotel lounge, a small notice caught my eye: community center event, guest speaker needed. Topic: life lessons from experience. At first I smiled faintly. That was for teachers, pastors, maybe retired professionals. Not for a woman like me whose only claim to fame was giving too much and learning too late. But something stirred in me, the same spark that had led me to lace up my shoes for the hiking group. Maybe my story could help someone else. I dialed the number. The woman on the other end, cheerful and warm, asked, "Do you have a story that others could learn from?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I said softly, "I do." The following week, I found myself standing at a podium in a modest room filled with folding chairs and people my age or older. Their faces were open, curious, waiting. I told them about Tom, about selling the seaside cottage, about Daniel and Vanessa's demands, about the refinancing and the recording that revealed their betrayal. Gasps filled the room at certain points, sympathetic nods at others. But then I told them the part that mattered most, the part I had only recently begun to understand. I learned that love without respect is a prison. And I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to say no. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors that keep dignity inside and keep exploitation out. When I finished, there was silence for a heartbeat, and then warm, steady applause. A man in the front row raised his hand. "Ma'am," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I've been paying my daughter's rent for 7 years. Every month she promises to do better, but nothing changes. Tonight, I think you gave me the courage to stop." Another woman spoke up. "My grandson uses me like a bank. I thought I was alone, but you've shown me I'm not." I left that night with tears in my eyes, but they weren't bitter. They were tears of release, of knowing my wounds had become someone else's lantern. The next morning, as I walked by the ocean, the world looked brighter, sharper. The gulls wheeled overhead and the salty breeze wrapped around me like an embrace. For the first time since Tom passed, I felt a flicker of excitement about tomorrow, not dread. Daniel called that evening. His voice was quiet, subdued. "Mom, Vanessa, and we've been talking. We don't know how to fix everything, but we know we can't keep living the way we have. I just wanted to say thank you for standing up to us. It wasn't an apology yet, not fully, but it was a beginning. And strangely, I wasn't desperate for more. My worth was no longer tied to their approval. My peace didn't depend on their kindness." That weekend, I returned to the hiking group. We climbed a trail that led to a bluff overlooking the sea. The view was breathtaking, the horizon stretching wide, the water sparkling in the afternoon sun. I stood there, chest heaving, sweat on my brow, and felt an overwhelming peace. Radiant, shining peace. One of the women, Margaret, clapped me on the shoulder. "You've got a good stride, Evelyn. We're glad you joined us." "Thank you," I said, smiling. "I'm glad, too." On the way back down, I thought about how far I had come. From humiliation in my own son's house to despair in a hotel room, to standing here, strong, hopeful, surrounded by friends who valued me for nothing more than my presence. That was enough. More than enough. That evening, I wrote in my journal, "I am not broken. I am not disposable. I am alive, renewed, and shining brighter for the cracks that nearly destroyed me." The bitterness was still there, a shadow that would never fully disappear, but it no longer controlled me. It reminded me, instead of what I had overcome, of the strength I had discovered when everything else was stripped away. I realized something simple yet profound. Sometimes the life you think you've lost is only clearing space for the life you were meant to live. As I drifted off to sleep, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not for what I had lost, but for what I had found: resilience, community, and a self-respect that glowed brighter than any chandelier at Ocean View Wedding Hall ever could. The weeks that followed my speech at the community center flowed like calm tides. The chaos of the past still lingered at the edges of memory, but it no longer commanded my days. Instead, I woke each morning with a sense of serenity I had not known in decades. The ocean seemed to mirror my transformation. Its waves still crashed against the rocks with force, but I no longer felt threatened by their roar. I felt at peace, as though nature itself had welcomed me into a new chapter. Daniel called more often now, his tone gentler, more thoughtful. Sometimes he asked about my health, other times just about my day. They were small conversations, but for me they were signs of growth. Vanessa was slower to change, but even she sent me a note once. "Thank you for teaching us hard lessons we didn't want to learn." I held on to that note like a fragile gift. It was not absolution, but it was acknowledgement. And in that acknowledgement, I discovered something deeper: wisdom. I realized that all the battles, the betrayals, and the lonely nights had taught me lessons I could not have learned any other way. The greatest of those lessons was this: love without boundaries is not love at all. It is surrender. I thought of Tom, often sitting by the water with his picture in my hands. "You'd be proud of me," I whispered, not because I stood against them, but because I finally stood for myself. There was a pride in that thought that felt everlasting, the kind that settles deep in your bones and cannot be shaken. I had not just survived, I had grown into someone stronger, clearer, and more unshakably certain of her worth. One Saturday morning, the hiking group reached a summit overlooking the whole coastline. The view stretched endlessly, the sea glimmering beneath a sky washed clean by dawn. Margaret, walking beside me, said softly, "Look at you, Evelyn. You've got a glow these days." I laughed. Maybe that's what freedom looks like. We stood in silence, letting the wind whip our hair, letting the sun warm our faces. In that moment, I felt like the world itself was clapping me on the shoulder, whispering, "Well done. You chose dignity. You chose yourself." When Thanksgiving arrived, Daniel and Vanessa invited me to dinner. This time, it was different. No demands, no expectations. They had cooked every dish themselves, cleaned the house with care, and greeted me with genuine warmth. For the first time in years, I felt like a guest, not a servant. During dessert, Daniel raised his glass. "To my mom, who loved us enough to stop us from destroying ourselves." I didn't cry, not this time. I simply smiled, proud and serene. Later that evening, Vanessa pulled me aside. "We're expecting," she whispered, her eyes shining, "and we want this child to know you as the strong woman who taught us what family really means." My hands trembled as I hugged her. A grandchild, new life, new hope. The circle was mending, not perfectly, but with stitches strong enough to hold. That night, rocking in my chair by the window, I reflected on the journey. From betrayal and despair to liberation and renewal to this moment of calm pride. My story was not about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming my worth. About learning that sometimes love requires distance, and sometimes the best way to teach others to value you is to first value yourself. And that, dear listener, is the lesson I leave with you. Set boundaries. Protect your dignity. And never confuse giving with being taken for granted. Love your family, yes, but love yourself enough to demand respect. If you remember nothing else from my story, remember this. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the bravest act is stepping back. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give is not money or sacrifice, but the strength of your example. I share my journey not because it is unique, but because it is universal. Perhaps you too have felt unappreciated, unseen, used by the very people you tried to help. If so, I hope my story gives you courage. Courage to stand tall, courage to choose dignity, courage to walk into the sunrise of your own life. Because if I, a widow in her 70s, trembling in a hotel room, heartbroken and betrayed, could find the strength to rise, then so can you. So from my heart to yours, thank you for listening, for walking beside me through every tear and triumph. If my voice touched you, I ask only this: subscribe to Stories of Auntie May. 365, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and join me again for more stories of family resilience and the wisdom that comes with age. And don't forget, your voice matters too. When you share your story, you remind the world that none of us walk alone. Until next time, may you stand tall, live with dignity, and carry your pride like a flame that never goes out.